Welcome to the last episode of Oscar Week for 30-minute reviews. I am Adam. We're wrapping up the Oscar week with the last nominee that I was able to see before the Oscars came out, and that would be Black Panther, which came out last February, a year ago. So, Black Panther, we're not going to discuss it as an entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're not going to discuss it as a superhero movie. We're going to discuss it as on the merits of any other movie that we've discussed. The same way we discussed The Favorite, we discussed Roma, all these other ones. I'm going to discuss it in that light, not in the light of how is it in regards to the other Marvel movies. I'm going to briefly say one thing, though. In my opinion, it's Marvel's third best movie this year. The first two being Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I know wasn't a Marvel Studios production, but it's still based on Marvel characters. And then the second being Infinity War. This is the third best Marvel movie that came out this year. Not to say it's bad, it's just not the best. As a movie, completely, we're gonna treat it not as a character with legacy, not as its spot in a larger pantheon. It's a story about a king who was newly crowned after his father is killed, and as a king, he also is a warrior prince under his people's culture. So he's got to fill both shoes. Arguably, to me, the least interesting character in this movie is T'Challa. Because a lot of time, everyone around him is making the decisions for him, and he's just kind of there, dealing with it. It's kind of like, when I discussed Wandering Earth on Beware of Spoilers last week. The main characters don't quite do anything, they just kind of get pushed around by the plot until the plot needs them to do something. And then they're just like, alright, whatever, why not? And that's how I feel T'Challa is in this movie. T'Challa doesn't quite have any autonomy until the third act, and even then, it's, he's like, well, what else am I gonna do? Everyone else around him is making the executive decisions for him, for better or for worse. And a lot of times, the decisions that he made for him are better than the decisions he would have made on his own. So what else have we got with this? The production design. I think the strongest aspect of this movie is, number one, its direction, and number two, its production design. Because while the effects are lackluster, the effects are not great in this movie. The effects on people, let me put it that way. The effects on people aren't great in this movie. Where it's like, there's one sequence in the movie that comes to mind as being both fantastic from a directorial standpoint, but from a VFX standpoint, it's very not great. The scene in the casino, the shot of everyone fighting in the casino in South Korea, that whole sequence, it's all shot in one take, and you have it going back and forth between the various people fighting, between Okoye, between Nakia, and then back to T'Challa, all of them fighting. And that whole sequence, it's very well directed. And from the time that whole fight starts until Claw blasts T'Challa off of the second floor back down to the first floor, it's all shot in one take, and it's very well done. That said, on the other side of things, the sequence with that, anytime they try to use CG to make the people move more organically and anything like that, and make the people, it creates a plasticky look that looks, it's not quite Matrix Reloaded, but it's like a step above Matrix Reloaded, where people, you can tell they don't look real, and it's kind of like, it takes away from the suspension of disbelief is broken for a minute. Then you have the, then the whole car chase is also very well done. That said, the visual effects for Wakanda are very well done. That's where the visual effects team really shines, and that goes along with the production design that I was talking about earlier. The production design in this movie is probably the strongest aspect, because everything needed to be designed from the ground up for this movie, because we had never seen I know I wasn't going to do this, but previous to this, we had never seen on this scale an Afrofuturist society with this large of a budget, with this big in this big of a release. So this is a big deal that needed to be built from the ground up, completely unique, completely for this on its own, and they did that beautifully here. The plot itself of the movie is pretty standard. If you ask me, it's like there are two plots that get used a lot in these blockbusters, and it's either chasing a MacGuffin or family drama, and this is the family drama plot, where it's basically just it's like a little bit Hamlet, a little bit other Shakespeare kind of meshed together. Whereas, like, you can definitely see the Hamlet influence, because I saw a lot of people saying when it came out, it's like, oh, it's just The Lion King. And it's like, no, The Lion King is Hamlet. This is just taking elements from Hamlet. You can also see bits and pieces of, like, I don't know where I was going with that, but, there's the, like, the fact that the brother coming, it's kind of a reverse, Aquaman and this movie are reverses of each other in the story. It's just this one does it a lot better than Aquaman does. Where in Aquaman, Arthur doesn't really want to be involved at all. And it's just, in reality, both sides, Orm and Aquaman, would have been better off if neither of them interacted. But in this one, because T'Challa and Killmonger are interacting, that's what really drives the plot. And it actually is interesting when the two characters interact, to see these estranged brothers who had never met before. Not brothers, they're cousins, interact, who had never interacted before, who come from two very different walks of life and two very different experiences, and seeing them interact with each other was a very interesting way to do it. Then that brings me to my last point. I think that if you're going to nominate this movie for anything, any of the major categories, I think the biggest case you could have made was nominating Michael B. Jordan to play as Killmonger. He has the best performance in the movie, where it's like he's not a one-dimensional villain. Like, typically when Marvel makes movies, all the villains are typically one-dimensional. They have one thing that they're trying to do. They have very little motivation behind it. Like, for example, Ronan, Malekith, Ultron. Most of the villains, with the exception of like Loki and Thanos, are like one-dimensional villains who don't really have any characterization besides the fact that they're evil and they want to finish their plot, whatever their plot is. We actually get into the nuance of why Killmonger has been radicalized to the point that he is, and you can make the case that he's the right person. And I've always said that one of the best ways you can write a villain is if you can put yourself in the villain's shoes and see, okay, that's not completely unreasonable, then, you know, if they're just taking a step too far, it's like their belief system is, their core belief system is okay. The thing that makes them the villain is that they're taking it too far. So, like, if you look at X-Men, I keep going back to other superhero movies. I didn't want to do that, but like, if you go to X-Men, Magneto is a villain, but you can make the case for Magneto and why Magneto is right and why Professor X is wrong. And that's why those movies work so well, when those two are a foil to each other. And that's why this movie works too, because as much as T'Challa represents someone who wants to go out and help the world and, you know, do it that way through peace, Killmonger is someone who doesn't quite see the world in the same way, because he's grown up in Oakland and he knows that may not work. It probably won't work, and that you need to use a harder approach. That said, a coup and weaponizing everyone to do to overthrow all the world's governments is extreme, and that's why he's the bad guy. But it's still an interesting take and an interesting way, an interesting train of thought. So yeah, so we'll wrap up there. I don't think that this movie is going to actually win Best Picture. I think it was nominated for its cultural impact and how it was the first superhero movie with an African American lead, and how it shattered box office records and expectations domestically and partially abroad. It's the second biggest international superhero movie of the year, first biggest domestically, even overshadowing Infinity War. And that's probably why it was nominated, but it's not gonna win. The winner this year, I stand by it. What I said a few weeks ago, is going to be the Green Book, or I think it's just Green Book. I keep going between the two. I think the movie is just Green Book, and that's gonna be the winner this year. So yeah, we'll wrap up there for today. I'm gonna have another episode going out. Well, okay. I'm recording this on Saturday. Okay, so this episode's going up tomorrow. Also, yesterday, so on today when I'm recording it, I'm gonna have an episode about some news that broke today, and then so yeah, that'll be up the episode before this. I don't know why I'm talking about that in the future tense, but yeah. So we'll wrap this up for today. I have been Adam, and we will be back with mid-90s next week.